I would like to remind you that the virtual mini-plenary is deemed to be in the precincts of Parliament and constitutes a meeting of the National Assembly for debating purposes only. In addition to the rules of virtual sittings, the rules of the National Assembly, including the rules of debate, will apply. Members enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Assembly. Members should equally note that anything that is said in the virtual platform is deemed to have been said to the House and may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in shall be considered to be present and are requested to mute their microphones and only to unmute when recognized to speak. The microphones are very sensitive and will pick up noise, which might disturb the attention of other members. And when recognized to speak, you must please unmute your microphone. Where the connectivity permits, connect your video. Members may make use of the icons on the bar at the bottom of their screens, which is an option that allows a member to put up his or her hand to raise a point of order. The secretary will alert me in this regard. And when using the virtual system, members are urged to refrain or desist from unnecessary points of order. Lastly, I wish to remind you that we are meeting in a mini plenary session and therefore any decisions will be taken in a full plenary session of the National Assembly. The first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Honorable Shaik Emam. I now recognize the Honorable Shaik Emam.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Let me start off, Honorable Chairperson, with the quote from our former head of government, our icon, Madiba Nelson Mandela, who once proclaimed, "Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." Today, we are presented with an opportunity to assist in the realization of that dream, that freedom. The National Freedom Party therefore hereby moves to introduce a draft resolution to downgrade South Africa's embassy in Israel. Now, are you breaking up, Chairperson? This resolution...
Honorable Shaik Emam,
Yes,
Honorable
sir.
Shaik Emam, please disconnect your video because your connection is very bad. Thank you.
Is that okay now, Chairperson?
You may proceed, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Chairperson. Right. I was quoting from our former icon, the Honorable Nelson Mandela, who once proclaimed, "Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." Today, we are presented with that opportunity to assist in the realization of that freedom. The National Freedom Party therefore hereby moves to introduce this draft resolution. This resolution resolves to downgrade the South African embassy in Israel to a liaison office until such time Israel stops all hostilities against Palestinian people and respects their rights to exist and complies with all international agreements entered into. Honorable Chairperson, just last week, Israel troops killed at least 11 Palestinians and wounded dozens more during a raid in the occupied West Bank. Honorable colleagues, we cannot afford to do nothing while Palestinians are being subjected to the same kind of oppression and atrocities that we experienced under the apartheid regime. We cannot allow ourselves to forget the struggles and sacrifices of our own people, many of whom occupied this august house, who fought and died for our freedom and equality. We cannot let history repeat itself in any form. This resolution, House Chairperson, is a call to action to demand accountability from Israel. It is a courageous move that will demonstrate our commitment as a country to justice, human rights, and freedom. By passing this resolution, we will send a powerful message, Chairperson, to the world that South Africa remains a beacon of hope and a shining example of what is possible when we come together in pursuit of a more just and equitable world. Let us seize this moment with courage and conviction, knowing that our actions today will have a profound impact on the lives of countless individuals who are counting on us to speak truth to power. Honorable Chairperson, Palestinians have been forcibly moved out of their homes and off their land to make way for illegal settlement. This, my esteemed colleagues, is a reminiscent of the forced removals in Sofia Town and District 6. Honorable Chairperson, Palestinians, including millions of refugees living in exile, have been prevented from returning to their homes and land. They have been subjected to systematic and severe deprivation of their fundamental human rights. Palestinians, especially those in the Gaza Strip, have been denied the right to freedom of movement and residence. They have been subjected to murder, torture, and unlawful imprisonment. Honorable Chairperson, like so many of our current and former colleagues here in this August House, Palestinians are being persecuted because of their opposition to apartheid. Too often we are told that the term apartheid is being unfairly applied to Israel. We are told that it is an anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. Honorable Chairperson, we have the Harvard researcher and daughter of the Holocaust survivor, Sarah Roy, who said, open quote, as a people, we have been unable to link the creation of Israel with the displacement of Palestinians. We have been unwilling to see, let alone remember, that finding our place meant the loss of theirs. Close quote. Honorable Chairperson, history is clear. The state of Israel was built through the displacement, murder, and maiming of Palestinians act to maintain the grip on power they have instituted. Apartheid practices to control and manage Palestinians. The institution of apartheid by the state of Israel contravenes international law and is a violation of the human rights of Palestinians. Former UN Special Rapporteur and Emirate Professor Law at Princeton University, Richard Falk, reported to the UN Human Rights Council that Israel is guilty of racial discrimination, apartheid, and torture in its systemic oppression of Palestinians. Honorable Chairperson, this view has been corroborated by an array of other UN officials and academics, including John Dugard, Falk's predecessor in the past post of UN Special Rapporteur. He stated that the charge of apartheid applies to Israel, concluding that Israel's practices in the West Bank are not only reminiscent of, and in some cases, worse than apartheid as I existed in South Africa, but in breach of the legal prohibition of apartheid. These are not mere allegations or rumors, but facts presented by experts. We cannot simply ignore them because they don't fit with our view of the world. Honorable Chairperson, we understand that the downgrading of our embassy in Israel will have consequences. However, we cannot allow fear or intimidation to dictate our actions when it comes to defending basic human rights and dignity. The downgrading of relations with the apartheid South Africa placed immense pressure on the apartheid government, contributing to its downfall. Many will argue that downgrading in Israel will impair our ability to act as a neutral mediator or in the esteemed colleagues, let us be clear. Neutrality is not an option in the face of oppression. Remaining silent in the face of egregious human rights abuses is not neutrality, it is complicity. Our continued diplomatic relations with Israel suggest that we condone other action. The sentiment was best articulated by our beloved Archbishop Desmond Tutu, may his soul rest in peace, who said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you are chosen the side of the oppressor. Honorable Chairperson, unfortunately, the lack of action against the state of Israel has embroidered them over the years. We have witnessed the killing of journalists, civilians, and activists. Honorable colleagues, it is estimated that from 1948 to 2022, 31,450 Palestinians have died at the hands of apartheid Israel. Honorable Chairperson, we have to do all we can to end the systemic violence and persecution of Palestinians, and we have to resist the temptation to reduce the Palestinian struggle for liberation. Honorable Chairperson, we must use all diplomatic channels at our disposal to make our voice heard and bring about change. The NFP therefore urges all members of Parliament to support this resolution and stand with us in pursuit of justice, equality, and freedom. Let us put aside our political differences and unite in taking a meaningful stand against the apartheid practice of Israel. Let us be on the right side of history. Let us honor the legacy of Nelson Mandela and all those who fought for freedom and justice. Let us send a message to the world that South Africa will not be passive or neutral about oppression and human rights violation anywhere. Let us create a true society where all can live freely. Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Muamapelo.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And the collective of the collectives of different members sitting in the house here today. Let me start with the quote. Revolutionary leadership is not for the faint-hearted, the flamboyant, or the fly-by-night, the easily flattered, the easily satisfied, or the easily intimidated, the seekers after excitement or popularity or martyrdom. These are the words of Grace and Lee Box in a book called Revolution and Evolution in the 21st Century. Chairperson and honorable members, we fully support the decision to recall South Africa's ambassador to the State of Israel. This is informed by the ANC's resolution and our response to the atrocities committed by apartheid Israel on the Palestinian people. On March 25, 2019, the United States officially recognized Jerusalem as the capital seat of Israel. The final status of Jerusalem has always been one of the most difficult and sensitive questions in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It was argued that a unilateral decision will break with the international consensus and prejudge an issue that was supposed to be left to negotiations. As South Africa, and indeed as the African National Congress, we have aligned ourselves with the international community and continue to see East Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian state. In 1980, the United Nations Security Council adopted a resolution condemning Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem and declared it a violation of international law. Indeed, these acts of Israeli impunity continue to sound the death knell of any peace process. As lovers of freedom and of justice, we stand with the Palestinian people in their quest for self-determination, but also in their resistance against the deprivation of their human rights and the denial of their dignity by apartheid Israel. Unashamedly, we associate ourselves with the sentiments expressed by Michael Link, Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Palestine territory, occupied since 1967. In his March 2022 report to the Human Rights Council, he lamented the fact that with the eyes of the international community wide open, Israel has imposed upon Palestinians an apartheid reality in a post-apartheid world. With our experience of apartheid as South Africa, we have observed with utter disgust and disbelief how Palestinians suffer the same treatment we went through as the majority of Black people in this country. We cannot but notice and agree with the Special Rapporteur and the Human Rights Watch in concluding that the political system of entrenched rule in occupied Palestinian territory satisfied the prevailing evidentiary standard for the existence of apartheid. An institutionalized regime of systematic racial oppression and discrimination has been established. This system of alien rule had been established with the intent to maintain the domination of one racial, national, ethnic over another. And the imposition of this system of institutionalization discrimination with the intent of permanent domination had been built upon the regular practice of inhumane acts by apartheid Israel. He highly concluded that this is indeed apartheid. Just like in South Africa in the past, apartheid laws are approved by the Israeli Knesset such as the nationality law, the citizenship law, the anti-terrorism law, the planning and building law, in addition to the settlement law, constituting a discriminatory legal system. The Israeli opposition to the establishment of the state of Palestine and rejecting any political negotiations and which constituted the apartheid regime. This is a crime against humanity, as stipulated in the international humanitarian law, as well as the Rome Statutes and the International Convention on the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. Since the occupation, Israel's apartheid regime has been evident in its practices, such as land grabs and settlement establishment, with illegal demographic changes and strategic fragmentation of the territory. The occupying powers continue to enjoy impunity, with a concerning lack of accountability on its persistence of human rights violation in the occupied Palestinian territory. Israel has flagrantly violated its obligations under international law, depriving the Palestinian people from enjoying their inalienable rights, including the right of self-determination and the right of return. Israel is committing apartheid in Palestine territory, and this apartheid regime must be dismantled through all means that are democratic and legal. It is the duty of the international community to bring this deplorable situation to an end. The Palestinian people have the right to an independent, free, sovereign state established as per 1967 borders and with East Jerusalem as its capital. We have observed that the occupying powers of human rights violations have continued, namely house demolitions and attempts to expel people from various areas. There is continuous targeting of Palestinian civilians and children as a result.
Honorable Maumapelo, may I request you to switch off your video because you are no longer audible. Please switch off your video. Honorable Maumapelo, will you please switch off your video? And may I also make a request to other members who will participate to do the same. You do not need to switch on your video because of the poor network connectivity. Honorable Maumapelo, are you back now?
Extra is
Honorable Maumapelo, you are no longer audible. We cannot hear you.
Am I audible?
You're not audible. Okay, what we will do is, honorable members, we've kept check on where the member is in his speech.
Am I audible now, Chair?
You are now audible. You are now audible. Please proceed.
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you.
Thank you. Please proceed now.
Am I audible?
Yes, you can proceed.
I don't know now what is the problem because I can clearly hear you.
We can hear you now, honorable member.
Am I now audible?
Yes, you
okay.
are.
We have observed that the occupying powers, human rights. Thank you very much.
Honorable Maumapelo, we've now completely lost you.
Chairperson. we have observed that the occupying power have continued in various areas. There is children. These constitute. Okay, Chair, I can hear you, but it's fine. You can proceed to the next speaker.
No, thank you, Honorable Mwamapelo. Honorable members, I really beg for your patience because due to the ongoing load shedding, it is difficult to maintain a connection in certain areas. So we are very mindful of that. You are more than welcome to leave your video off so that at least we can hear your input in the debate. The next speaker is the Honorable Chetty. Is the Honorable Chetty on the platform?
Good afternoon, Chairperson.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I wish to start this debate with the famous quote by American civil rights activist Dolores Soto, and I quote, "When you have a conflict, that means that there are truths that have to be addressed on each side of the conflict. And to resolve that, you have to get people on both sides of the conflict involved so that they can dialogue," end quote. Chairperson, the conflict on Israel and Palestine has been going on for longer than most of us have lived. Why is it that amongst millions of people in the world, with all the leadership that exists, this conflict has not ceased? The answer lies in the hidden agendas and political intentions of many countries and many politicians. When you pick sides in a conflict as a bystander, you only fuel the conflict and perpetuate the divisions even further. There are some amongst us and some leaders in the world who stand to benefit from this conflict. War and conflict is big business and has huge political currency and benefit. Many use the conflict to further their own political interests and gain popularity amongst their supporters and potential supporters. But in reality, many of them have made no contribution whatsoever to building unity. This debate is yet another opportunity for us to pick a side instead of choosing the path of unity. We will never contribute to unity when we attack and criticize one over the other. It merely serves to reinforce the deep-seated hatred that has been perpetuated for decades. If the world wants to bring about meaningful change and unity amongst the Israelis and the Palestinians, they must promote peaceful dialogue and a genuine willingness to respect the freedoms of all people in both Israel and Palestine. They will not achieve this by promoting divisions and domination by one over the other. Chairperson, our country has walked this path before. We made the choice between war and peace. Our historical leaders have had the courage to promote dialogue and find a lasting solution to peace, given our history. And with the wisdom of the father of our nation, the late Tata Nelson Mandela, who said that negotiation and discussions are the greatest weapons we have for promoting peace and development, unquote. If we can do this, so too can Israel and Palestine. Downgrading an embassy will add no value whatsoever to the ongoing conflict. It will only serve to reinforce the divisions. Our position as the Democratic Alliance is very clear, and it's also the position of this very South African government and the United Nations, and it has not changed. We want to see a return to political dialogue, and world leaders must play a meaningful role in promoting this dialogue to bring lasting peace.
Honorable Chetty,
yes,
there
Chairperson.
is a request from a member on the platform who wants to ask you a question. Can you take a question?
Not yet, Chair. My time is limited.
Please proceed, Honorable Chetty.
Thank you, Chair. We want to see a return to political dialogue, and world leaders must play a meaningful role in promoting this dialogue to bring lasting peace and freedom to the people of Israel and Palestine. We support the two-state solution that will promote unity and peace amongst both Israelis and Palestinians. We cannot and will never condone any form of human rights violation regardless of who is the perpetrator. And regardless of how many times we will say this, our political opponents will create their own narrative, not for the benefit of Israel or Palestine, but to fuel their own political aspirations here in South Africa. The solution to conflict does not lie in which side can succeed in dominating the other. It lies in the respect for human rights and freedoms for all. This is exactly what the late Tata Nelson Mandela meant when he said that you will achieve more in this world through acts of mercy than you will through acts of distribution, close quote. Why then should any one of us contribute to a campaign of dominance of one over the other? We all should condemn any form of violence and human rights violations regardless of who is responsible for it. We should also be on the side of peace, not on picking one side over the other. All this does is import the conflict amongst ourselves, and this promotes further divisions. When you behave like a leader and promote dialogue, you will bring people together and promote unity. A leader will be proposing measures like the meeting held earlier this week at the Red Sea port of Aqaba in Jordan, between top Israeli and Palestinian officials with the intentions of halting the surge of violence. But when you behave like a politician, seeking support for your small fledgling party, you will move motions in this house that add no value to lasting peace and stability for either the people of Israel or Palestine. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is from the EFF. Is there a speaker from the EFF?
Yes, Chair.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, our position on Israel is simple. That entity is an apartheid state forced upon the people of Palestine by the West. Since the establishment of that state, millions of Palestinian people, including women and children, have been dispossessed of their land, evicted from their homes, and thousands have been murdered by the racist and colonial regime. South Africa knows better than most how devastating settler violence is. We equally know the importance of international solidarity in fighting against a racist and rogue regime. It is for this reason that we as the EFF have been calling for the complete closure of South Africa's embassy in Israel at every platform we've had. Numerous submissions have been made to the minister in the Committee of International Relations and Cooperations, in debates made in this very house. And the response, Chairperson, has been the very same all the time. The ANC is indecisive. They are unable to provide to the persecuted people of Palestine the same solidarity the rest of the progressive world offered to us while we were subjected to the same violence. The public announcements about downgrading our diplomatic ties with Israel have been very hollow and not followed by any concrete steps towards cutting diplomatic ties with Israel. Chairperson, the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations of 1961 was meant to facilitate, and I quote, the development of friendly relations, close quote, through a uniform set of practices and principles. Israel has an embassy on our soil, and we also have an embassy in Israel on top of stolen Palestinian land. The presence of our diplomatic mission in Israel is a legitimation of the violence against Palestinian women and children. It means that South Africa and Israel share friendly relations through uniform principles and practices. What principles and practices could South Africa be sharing with an apartheid state under a Black government post-apartheid? This debate is long exhausted. There is no political will on the South African government. Israel is going against all international laws and treaties that prohibit and explicitly criminalize apartheid. And yet we embrace them, and we treat them as our friends in our shores. Let it not be an excuse, Chairperson, that the embassy equally assists Palestinians. If that is so, let the embassy be accredited and situated in a location that does not persecute the people of Palestine. DIRCO is in a process of shutting down missions, but let me tell you, Chairperson, Israel is not one of them. The ANC is indecisive and is scared of the backlash from those who prop up the violence in Palestine. Israel continues to conduct daily raids in the West Bank, with more than 9,000 Palestinians being injured, 29 killed, of which 7 are children, and that is in January 2023 alone. Israel enjoys the backing of the US, which, mind you, holds the veto powers in the UNSC. So therefore, this makes it more difficult for the UN to be objective. The people of Palestine, like the people of South Africa during apartheid, can only rely on international solidarity to isolate the apartheid state of Israel from trade and any other forms of relations. But Chairperson, South Africa continues to trade with the apartheid state of Israel, with exports to Israel being more than $357 million. This now in November 2022, and that being in diamonds. So in simple terms, Chairperson, this means the current government will never downgrade, let alone close the Israel embassy in South Africa. That means that our talks that we stand with the people of Palestine will only remain a talk shop, because South Africa will always prioritize profits over humanity and the lives of the people of Palestine. Chair, we are in support of the draft resolution. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Yeah.
The next speaker is the Honorable Schlengwa.
Honorable Chairperson, this debate brought to this House on downgrading of South Africa's embassy in Israel is at the very least disingenuous. It is nothing short of regressive diplomacy. The first initiative to downgrade the relations with Israel had appeared in the resolution of the ANC conference in 2017. The text of the resolution called for a downgrade of the South African embassy to a liaison office. Following the passing of this resolution, the then DIRCO Minister, Honorable Sisulu, in 2019, announced that South Africa is not going to send a new ambassador to Tel Aviv as part of the downgrade. Therefore, the relations have already been downgraded. Downgrading of relations or downgrading the embassy is a fluid concept. There is no clear definition of these terms. It can include reducing the number of diplomats at an embassy, recall of the ambassador, and up to closing the embassy and even severing the ties. Each of these steps constitute a downgrade of relations. It is another means of sloganeering. Instead of being genuinely invested in the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians and using all diplomatic channels and resources available to bring together the two sides, it seeks to downgrade the embassy. The result of such downgrade will only make diplomatic channels harder to access. It will affect not only South African Jewish community, but sectors of both the Christian and Muslim communities. We as South Africa are a nation founded by negotiations and a global model of a peaceful transition, and ours is to multiply this around the world. The proposed motion today sees South Africa walk away from the negotiation table. South Africa should be showing its commitment to peace and negotiations by pursuing a two-state solution. The IFP stands by the conviction that the right of Israel to exist and self-determination must be protected under international law. Equally so, the independence and self-determination of the Palestinian people. The IFP has always maintained that a negotiated two-state solution consistent with the 1967 borders is the only way to effectively address and advance the peace process in the Middle East. Chairperson, the hallmark of South Africa's diplomatic transition was negotiation. Coming to the negotiating table and having those difficult conversations have been the solution. How will walking away from the table help? The downgrading of the embassy will not help the Palestinians. It will lead us to having little to no influence in the region as Israel gains more allies and moves towards normalizing relations with many of its neighboring states. It would not be wise for us to pursue regressive diplomacy at a time when Israel is working towards normalizing relations in the region. The Abraham Accords of 2020 between Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco have not only set a path towards the normalization of relations, but have resulted in economic and cultural exchange taking place. The downgrading of the South African embassy in Israel will not inspire confidence in South Africa, but rather places South Africa in an awkward position when it can no longer be trusted as an honest broker of peace, especially as a member of both the United Nations and the African Union. As the IFP, we maintain our position and call for calm and restraint in peaceful action within the prescripts of international law by both Israel and Palestine. While logistics are at the last step in considering this matter, it is worth noting that as right now, the South African diplomats accredited to the Palestinian Authority are also accredited to Israel. This accreditation enables immunities and privileges that are granted by the Israeli government, which includes accommodation in Israel, travel between Israel and Palestinian authorities, be it the West Bank or Gaza Strip, easy access to airports and border crossings. Obviously, the closing of the South African embassy in Israel will also affect the relations in the Palestinian Authority and potentially require diplomats working in the Palestinian Authority to relocate to
Honorable
Ramallah.
Member, your time is now
urges
expired.
government to reconsider this position regarding the downgrading of our diplomatic ties between South Africa and Israel. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honorable C.P. Mulder.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable Chairperson, colleagues, this motion is brought to the House this afternoon by the Honourable Member Shaik Emam. And he followed his motion with a speech in which he launched a very strong attack on Israel and the state of Israel. He was then followed by the ANC spokesperson as well as the spokesperson from the EFF. Now, I was wondering if the Honourable Shaik Emam has ever visited the state of Israel. I was wondering if he visited the West Bank, if he's been to Ramallah, if he's been to the Gaza Strip, if he's been to Israel and see for himself what is Israel all about. The attack that he launched on the state of Israel are all the cliches that we have become used to. Now, the tragedy is that Israel bashing and these kind of attacks on Israel are so yesterday. They are so out of line with what's happening in the international community. And that's the tragedy also in terms of our own foreign policy and the discussions that we're having with regard to Israel. And with this kind of approach, South Africa has relegated ourselves in terms of foreign policy to the absolute periphery of what's happening internationally with regard to the state of Israel. Because if the Honourable Shaik Emam is familiar with what's happening in the state of Israel, he will be aware that there are Palestinians in the Israeli Defense Force. He will be aware that there are Palestinians elected to the Parliament of Israel. He will be aware of the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords were referred to. A number of Muslim states have moved beyond this debate. They have normal diplomatic relations now with the state of Israel. We are not going to assist Israel, and what we must perhaps understand and realize is the following. Israel does not need South Africa. We need Israel. And if you don't know that, you haven't done your homework. Israel is at the forefront of technological development in the world. They can assist this country tomorrow in terms of our water problems and our infrastructure problems. But by pushing this ideological agenda, we are making ourselves completely irrelevant. And you know what? There are a number of African states, fellow African states, who are not that stupid. Let me give you a list. The following African countries, and there are more, have normal diplomatic ties with the state of Israel to their absolute benefit. Angola, Cameroon, Chad, Congo-Kinshasa, Egypt, Equatorial Guinea, Ethiopia, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Zambia, and there are more. My honest appeal is that South Africa should wake up, that we should understand what's happening internationally. The international community has moved beyond this debate, and Israel and the Palestinian world as well. If we really want to assist the people of Palestine, then we should play a role to convince them that they must also understand and move beyond the approach of just trying to be a victim and think then the world is going to assist them. We've moved beyond that. Let's assist the Palestinian people to come to the table, to put on the table and to negotiate, and then we can find a solution in the best interest of all the people in the Middle East. South Africa should move forward and understand that the current debate is so yesterday. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Kwankwa.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was struggling with my gadget a bit. The United Democratic Movement supports the call for the downgrading of the South African embassy in Israel until such time that Israel respects the human rights of Palestinians. As a country that has a history and is regarded globally as proponents of human rights, we have to undertake whatever diplomatic measures we can and use whatever diplomatic measures are available at our disposal to make sure that countries such as Israel undertake significant steps to ensure the respect of the human rights and the dignity of Palestinians. We have seen in the global media the death toll of Palestinians who have been killed by Palestinian soldiers, the demolishment of the homes and the displacements of hundreds of people in Palestine should awake a sense of sympathy from all of us as human rights defenders. The people of Palestine continue on a daily basis to live in fear, hopelessness, and they're desperate, like all of us, to live dignified and decent lives. As human rights promoters, we have a responsibility to act against any human rights violations in order to restore equality and freedom. We seem to have forgotten that some of the factors that led to the unraveling of apartheid in this country was the imposition of international sanctions and the role that was played by other countries around the world in support of our fight against apartheid. We need now to do the same thing and return the favor to some of the countries who are still facing apartheid in the 21st century. Therefore, downgrading our embassy from Israel will put pressure and emphasize our disapproval of the status quo in Palestine. We should also try to work with all multilateral institutions and ensure that multilateral institutions work towards ensuring that the rights of the people of Palestine are respected and their dignity is promoted on a daily basis. The current oppression of Palestinians shows that human rights around the world are being rolled back. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Do we have a speaker from Good? The next speaker then is the Honourable Swartz from the ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. Honorable members, we are participating in this debate with the intention of highlighting the plight of the Palestinian people and the continued aggression of Israel. The situation in the occupied Palestinian territory remains volatile, with escalated tensions continuing to manifest. Recently, T Malatji, Special Coordinator of the Middle East Peace Process, reported that settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territory, as well as violence against civilians, have continued. Wennesland further said that in the West Bank, 29 Palestinians were killed by Israeli security forces, while Israeli settlers and civilians perpetrated 128 attacks against Palestinians, resulting in 1 death. In Gaza, 49 Palestinians were killed, while 1 Israeli civilian and 1 Israeli security forces personnel were killed. The current condition stands usually exacerbated by sustained and escalated Israeli aggression coupled with military activity, the disrespecting of holy sites, increased promotions of the annexations, especially after the January 2023 statement by Prime Minister Netanyahu, in which he declared that his government plans to, and I quote, advance and develop settlements in all parts of the land of Israel, in the Galilee, Negev, Golan Heights, and Judea and Samaria, close quote. This concerning statement in many respects signaled the end of pursuance of the two-state solution by the government of Israel. The escalating situation also includes continued demolitions, displacements, and exceptionist activity directed at Palestinians entrenching Israeli presence in the OPTs, particularly in the West Bank. These developments illustrate the lack of any meaningful effort or process directed at achieving peace. Military activity, search and arrest operations, killings, field executions, torturous techniques, movement restrictions, collective punishment, laying siege to entire communities and towns, settlements, enterprises, and the confiscation or sealing of Palestinian-owned structures, homes, demolitions and displacement, settler violence pressure on civil society and humanitarian respondents do not only define daily Palestinian experience, but continue to intensify and expand. Recently, we noted that the United States Secretary of State, Mr. Anthony Blinken, was in the Middle East in February, and we have not seen any breakthrough in reducing tensions between Israelis and Palestinians following his visit. We also note Mr. Blinken's repeat of the US government's long-standing aspirations for a two-state solution in which Palestinians get their own country, an idea that is openly rejected by far-right figures in Israel's newly installed government. The visit by Mr. Blinken follows on the heel of the visit by the US President Biden in 2022. However, despite these visits, the situation has not changed for the better. To ensure the reduction of the tensions and ensure the rights of the Palestinian people are respected. As the ANC, we continue to strongly oppose the discontinued regard for the prevailing and long-standing internationally accepted concepts, particularly regarding the circumvention of final stated issues such as the borders, the status of Jerusalem, and the right of return of refugees. The ANC supports all efforts aimed at the establishment of a viable, continuous Palestinian state existing side by side in peace with Israel, within internationally recognized borders based on those for June 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital in line with all relevant UN resolutions, international law, and internationally agreed parameters. In this regard, Palestine will seek a UN Security Council resolution to protect the two-state solution, which the ANC supports. The normalization of Arab-Israeli relations will also potentially contribute to increased regional stability. We conclude by reiterating that our government said in condemnation of the tensions in the Middle East, that the South African government strongly condemns the unjust attacks on civilians by Israel in Gaza and Jerusalem. The continued escalation of attacks by Israel on Palestinians in Gaza is totally unjust and shameful, particularly in targeting of most of the vulnerable section of the Palestinian community, children, women, and the elderly. South Africa also urges Israel to stop all planned evictions of Palestinian families in the Sheikh Jarrah area. Distributing images of Israel's ongoing attacks on Palestinians
Honorable Swartz.
which violates UN resolution for the intervention to have the Israeli government conduct, investigated, and referred to the ICC crimes against humanity. I thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Honorable Member. There was just towards the end of your speech, just a break in the communication. But thank you for completing your speech in time. The next speaker is from the PAC.
Chair, we are not speaking, but we support the resolution.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is then the Honorable Thring.
Thank you, Honorable House Chairperson. The ACDP would like to remind this House and South Africans at large that all political parties are guided by their worldview. Some are driven by a liberal, secular, humanistic worldview, and others a social, communistic, atheist worldview. I wish to make it very clear that the ACDP is guided by a biblical worldview, and underscoring this view is the recognition of our Judeo-Christian historical background. It bears repeating that our Messiah, Christ Jesus, was born a Jew. And while those who have different worldviews from ours draw their inspiration from books like Karl Marx and Stalin and Mao Zedong and Charles Darwin, we within the ACDP draw our inspiration and guidance from our holy book, the Bible. It is this book which compels us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem in accordance with Psalm 122, verse 6, and for the descendants of Abraham, to pray for the descendants of Abraham, the patriarch of Israel, according to Genesis 12:3. As the ACDP, we can do no other. We believe that the efforts to downgrade the South African embassy in Israel will have a deeply negative impact on the South African Christian community, who make up a large portion of pilgrims to the Holy Land. Israel bashing appears to be involved.
We must bring
while it
Johannesburg
reveals the
in
hypocrisy-
the Bible as well.
While it reveals the hypocrisy of those bashers
Honorable
who
String.
remain silent
Honorable
on the genocide.
Honorable
Over
String.
1 million.
Honorable
Let me-
String, can you just halt and pause there? There's a member who continuously, without being recognized, just switches on his mic and continues speaking while the other speaker is on the floor. There's rules to debate and engagement. Please observe those rules. Otherwise, I will have no option but to ask you to leave the platform. Thank you very much. Please continue, Honorable String.
Honorable House Chair, Israel bashing appears to be in vogue, but it reveals also the hypocrisy of those bashers who remain silent on the genocide of some 1 million Muslims in Xinjiang in China. They remain silent when ISIS extremists beheaded Christians. They remain silent when hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Christians in Mozambique, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Sudan, and Mali have had their homes and churches burned to the ground, their women raped, men murdered, and children abducted by religious fundamentalists. South Africa has a moral and a constitutional obligation to support a negotiated solution in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and to distance itself from a radicalized position on Israel, which position simply undermines any hope of a negotiated process and peaceful outcome. A downgrade would not be of any benefit to the Palestinian people. It would entirely remove South Africa's ability and authority to play a mediator role in a future peace effort between Israel and the Palestinians. A mediator must, by definition, have relations with both parties in the room, otherwise it cannot be a mediator. The ACDP will not support this call for a downgrade of the SA Embassy in Israel. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. It cannot be that a former mayor of the city of Johannesburg proclaims, "I stand with Israel." The DA is not impartial, Mr. Chetty. Countries not only downgraded, but closed down embassies. That's why you can be a member of parliament. The DA position in events in Palestine is unhumanitarian. The DA has picked a side and promotes this unity. More Christians than people of other religions are harmed by occupation, demographically speaking, and the Bible does not support the occupation. With regard to Imam Shaik, we like to congratulate the NFP. Alan Suzman was also a one-man party, a one-woman party, and the DA should take example from the NFP. Honorable House Chair, I reiterate Al-Jamaah's call for the South African government to carry out its undertakings to assist liberation movement in Palestine with defensive weapons. Sanctions in all forms, like the ANC says, diplomatic, sports, cultural, were imposed on apartheid South Africa and it brought down that evil system of apartheid. Palestinians deserve nothing less from South Africa. They are a nation suffering under occupation. They were our allies and supporters in our struggle against occupation and oppression. I was in Libya when the plan was hatched by Palestinians to send weapons to South Africa. Honorable House Chair, we therefore support this motion by the NFP and congratulate Imam Shaik for bringing it to the attention of honorable members of parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you, honorable member. The next speaker is the honorable Mpiti.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. There are very few discussions that consider how South Africa's foreign policy prioritized human rights, given the ANC's close relations with states such as Cuba and Libya during its long liberation struggle. While much has been written regarding the inconsistencies of South Africa's commitment to a human rights-centered foreign policy, not enough attention has been dedicated to understanding where this policy choice came from. Additionally, how the origins of this policy shaped South Africa. It is now that we must look back and be reminded of why we must value peace over war, why we must value dialogue over anger, and most importantly, why we need cool heads around the table. Now, let me take my ANC colleagues back into the establishment of the first working group on foreign policy, which included members such as Peter Vale, Rob Davies, Alan Hirsch, Gary van Staden, Aziz and Isop Pahad, and former President Thabo Mbeki. They produced a document titled Foreign Policy in a New Democratic South Africa, which was published in the build-up to the first democratic elections. The culmination of this work was a new moralistic international foreign policy vision for South Africa. It argued that the ANC could use this new era in international relations by focusing on human rights. It expressed the belief that South Africa should become a beacon for, a champion of, the international crusade for the values of peace. The document also set out principles that would guide foreign policy in the future: a preoccupation with human rights, a belief in global solidarity, that justice and democracy should be the basis in international relations, a desire for international peace and the importance of Africa. It was clear then, as it is clear now, that we must stand on the side of diplomacy, on the side of peacekeeping, where it is not about grandstanding, but more about solutions that value every life, every society, and its sovereignty. I'm sure many colleagues who have followed our country's foreign policy will know that one of the most defining documents pre-1994 was an article titled South Africa's Future Foreign Policy, published in 1993 under the former President Nelson Mandela, which set out in detail what the country's foreign relations under an ANC-led government would entail. The main points that were widely publicized were 6 pillars: the primacy of law, the primacy of promotion of democracy, justice, peace for international community, and the importance of Africa. Former President Nelson Mandela argued that a human rights-based approach to South Africa's foreign policy will be the light that guides it in foreign affairs. What I expected to hear today, Honorable House Chair, is practical and pragmatic ways of engagement with this issue that reminds the world of the perils that South Africa has traveled and has overcome. Though South Africa's position in Africa and the world has waned, though it is no longer the largest economy in Africa, though it fails to exert meaningful influence beyond SADC, I had hoped we would once again remember what this democracy means to all of us and how it was attained. Through conciliation, through dialogue, through constructive measures that finally brokered peace. I had hoped to hear about tackling land restitution or human rights violations. People are being killed each and every day, yet here we are discussing showy and punitive measures that only add fuel to the fire. Now, when we get to the substance of this draft resolution, the argument being advanced here is not one that places cool heads around the table or one that is principled or value-based.
Honorable Mpiti, honorable member, will you please just switch off your video? Your connection is not very good and we're losing your speech. You may continue.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. When we get to the substance of this draft resolution, the argument being advanced here is not one that places cool heads around the table or one that is principled or value-based. It is an argument that fails to advance what was imagined by the very same ANC that we hear here today. It is an argument that prioritizes cosmetic changes instead of changes that will impact positively on the Palestinian people and the Israeli people. Like an ostrich in the sand, the ANC government is intent on acting out ideological and factional motivations, much to the detriment of its own people and its position in the world. Honorable Chair, the government of South Africa must not pick winners or losers. We must hold the line of the rule of law, the primacy of human rights and peace. The government must play a role it envisioned all those years ago. one of a peaceful mediation of conflict and peaceful coexistence, one of a two-state solution and an end to violence and a return to dialogue by both sides to ensure a peaceful resolution of the conflict. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. The Honorable Boetes, please proceed.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Deputy Minister, you are not audible. We cannot hear you. Honorable Deputy Minister, are you now back on the platform? Honorable members, the Honorable Deputy Minister is not audible. May I request one of the ANC whips who's on the platform to make contact with the Honorable Deputy Minister so that he can get a better connection from wherever he is. In the meantime, I'm going to ask the Honorable Shaik Emam to continue.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. First of all, allow me to thank the African National Congress for your stance in this particular matter. And yes, you are absolutely correct. This is also a resolution of the ANC in 2017 in your conference. And indeed, your stance on human rights, taking into consideration what we have been through in South Africa, goes a long way. And I think we appreciate that. Thank you very much to Al Jamaa. Yes, indeed, you are absolutely correct. Nowhere in the Bible does it say you must go out there and violate the rights of other people and take what is not rightfully yours. Thank you very much again to the UDM. Thank you for your stance. I think it is quite clear that you have the interest of the people at large, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much also to the AIC. But let me remind the DA, I think you are very short-sighted or you have a lapse in memory. Are you forgetting that there's been many international agreements that were entered into that Israel did not comply with? So it's not a decision or a stance that we are taking today that we got up last night and decided to take this. No, clearly it is not. I think you are forgetting that. Very importantly, can you tell us from your perspective and the DA, have you ever condemned the atrocities that are being committed? And yet, let's talk about the Russia-Ukraine war. You are taking sides there and you're talking about not taking sides. Nobody here is taking sides. What we have, the interest of humanity at large. And the Palestinians, there is no doubt about it, right, as rightfully alluded to by the EFF, that it's a rogue state, Israel. They are living on stolen, occupied land. And as for the ACDP, let me tell you, yes, indeed, opportunistic. You have found a vacuum in the political arena of South Africa. So you are doing exactly what the colonialists did, which used religion throughout the world to divide us. But you are forgetting, if you go to the history of humankind, that we all belong to one extended family. So you will always use religion to divide us. So we're not surprised at your conduct. But I think what is very important here is South Africa needs to take a stand that, yes, indeed, we know what apartheid is. We know we've experienced it. Let us not forget, Israel was one of those countries that colluded with the likes of the Afrikaner apartheid government here, tried to break the sanctions in this country. So we're not surprised that even the Freedom Front will come with the attitude. But we've noticed something, Chairperson, over a period of time. IFP, Freedom Front, DA, ACDP, I think if you go back into the history books and look at when it comes to matters that are of importance to be discussed in Parliament, they all follow suit in terms of the pattern in which they vote. So I'm not surprised that all of them don't care about human rights, but their own interests, and are funded, of course, by these institutions. Thank you.
Your time is now expired. Honorable Hendricks, you have got your hand.
Yes, I rise on a point of order, Honorable House Chair.
Yes. What is the point of order?
I smell a rat that those who stand with Israel are sabotaging our broadcast, and that's why the Deputy Minister can't speak. I think
Honorable Member, I think you're smelling a dead rat. There's definitely no interference from outside sources. We have a problem generally in the country with load shedding, and that is influencing the connectivity that we are having. I'm quite sure that that is the problem that we're also experiencing this afternoon. I now want
What
to
if he's right, Chair? What if he's right?
Honorable member from the PAC, you had an opportunity to make a speech and you refused to do so. Now you want to make a speech. It's not necessary to do so. Your time is gone. It's past. I want to recognize the Honorable Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. The Honorable Deputy Minister.
Yes, Chairperson, I just want to find out, am I audible now?
Yes, you are now audible, Honorable Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I just want to pivot my contribution on the fact that we are in March month, and March month in South Africa is characterized as the epoch when we must ordinarily heighten our expression and our consciousness on human rights, and also try to be a force multiplier in relation to constructing a shared national identity, in particular regarding. I want to obviously state what is our foreign policy position as it relates to the situation between Palestine and Israel. Honorable House Chair, South Africa has been unwavering in its support towards all efforts aimed at the establishment of a viable Palestinian state existing side by side in peace with the state of Israel within internationally recognized borders based on those of 4 June 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital, in line, Honorable Chairperson, with all relevant UN resolutions, international law, and internationally agreed parameters. Additionally, a viable and sustainable peace plan for the Middle East must ensure that Palestine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and economic viability is guaranteed with sovereign equality between Palestine and Israel. Given the dynamics with the increasing fragility of the Middle East peace process, and as both external and internal pressures being applied to the historical Palestine statehood agenda, coupled with the fact that there is ongoing threats by the government of Israel to annex large part of the West Bank, the government of South Africa continues to assess the level of political engagement required to render practical support to the cause of the Palestinian people. We therefore, Honorable House Chair, concur with the report of the UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, which stated that over 55 years, the Israeli military occupation has prevented the realization of the right to self-determination of the people of Palestine, thereby violating each component of that right and willfully pursuing the de-Palestinization of the occupied territory, unquote. The UN Special Rapporteur's report further detailed persistent violence, racism, and prejudice that Palestinian people face on a daily basis. We see daily, Honorable Chair, including now during February 2023, raids in Nablus and the persistent violence by illegal settlers on the indigenous people of Palestine. It is regrettable that the state of Israel continues to violate international law, including the UN Charter and Security Council resolutions, with impunity. The security and political situation in the West Bank are very volatile, and there are daily reports of killings of civilians, young and old, by the Israeli forces. We have seen in the recent years the cities of Nablus and the neighboring Jenin have become burning points for confrontation between Israeli military forces and Palestine residents in the West Bank. This could be attributed to many factors, but the most significant being the emergence of militant groups.
Honorable Deputy Minister, there is a point of order. I see the hand of the Honorable Mulder. The Honorable Mulder.
Honorable Chairperson, my apology for disturbing the Deputy Minister. It's not a point of order. I would just like to inquire if the Deputy Minister would be prepared to take a question.
Honorable Deputy Minister, are you prepared to take a question?
I can come and address the caucus of the Freedom Front Plus at another occasion.
Yeah, so you're not prepared to take a question?
Not at this stage.
Please proceed.
What South Africa's government stands for is the issue of peace diplomacy. And we wish to underscore that peace is still possible, albeit less probable with every day that passes. And we therefore call on the UN Security Council and the international community to take immediate, sustained, and collective action grounded in international law. We need to highlight the impunity enjoyed by Israel that constantly violates the law and the collective punishment endured by the Palestinian people entitled to its protection demonstrates that Israel has absolutely no regard for anyone or the rules of international law. We are encouraged, Honorable House Chair, by the fact that on 30th of December 2022, UNGA adopted a resolution entitled Israeli Practices Affecting the Human Rights of the Palestinian People in the Occupied Palestine Territory, including East Jerusalem, containing a request to the ICJ for an advisory opinion relating to the Israeli occupation of the Palestine territory. On the 6th of January 2023, we have seen the Israeli Security Cabinet approve a series of measures against the Palestine Authority, including the transfer of approximately $39 million in withheld tax revenue that Israel collects on behalf of the Palestine Authority to the families of Israelis killed in the Palestine attacks. This is a serious concern, Honorable House Chair, because it impacts adversely on the Palestine Authority's very precarious financial situation. Honorable House Chair, as a custodian of foreign policy and interstate relations, TERCO was required to give effect to the resolution taken at the governing party's 54th National Conference in December 2017, whereby we were directed to downgrade the South African Embassy in Israel to a liaison office. The downgrade was informed to give effect to the practical expression of support to the oppressed people of Palestine and the government's concern at the ongoing violation of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the refusal of the government of Israel to enter into any meaningful negotiations. This resolution was also guided by a sentiment that given the continued intransigency and belligerency of the government of Israel, that the relationship with South Africa and that government could not be typified as being business as usual. To give effect to this decision, the government of South Africa recalled its ambassador to Israel in May 2018, and our mission is currently headed by Chargé. The Palestine narrative evokes experience of our own history of racial segregation and oppression. And as oppressed people, we have experienced firsthand the effects of racial inequality and discrimination. And we are well aware, Honorable Chair, of the long-term impact and consequence of racial and other forms of discrimination. We wish to affirm that the only way to achieve peace and stability in the Middle East is through reaching a lasting peace between Palestinians and Israelis themselves and restore all legitimate rights of the Palestinian people in accordance with the two-state solution, including, Honorable House Chair, referencing the Madrid Principles, the Arab Peace Plan, and the Qatar Peace Plan, amongst others. Israelis' continued pronouncement about annexation of large parts of the West Bank and the building of additional settlements further undermines the prospects of peace and are glaring examples of violations of international law. Since 1967, for over half a century, Israel has systematically constructed over 180 settlements and outposts on land seized from the Palestinian people. Over 700,000 Israelis are living in settlements built from the ruins of demolished and destroyed Palestine property. Since the adoption of the first UN Security Council resolution on the situation of Palestine, Resolution 42 of March 1948, over 70 years ago, and all other subsequent resolutions has failed to ensure that these resolutions are implemented or any concrete action are taken to address the blatant violations of this resolution. We would like to remind the House of the UN Security Council adoption unanimously of Resolution 2334 on the 23rd of December 2016. It clearly states, we reaffirm that the establishment by Israel of settlements in the Palestine territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem, has no legal validity and constitute a flagrant violation under international law and is a major obstacle to the achievement of the two-state solution and a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace process. There can be absolutely no ambiguity around this resolution, Honorable Chairperson. We have a moral obligation to contribute and support the Palestinian people. To this end, on the 21st August 2022, South Africa and Palestine has launched a strategic dialogue between our two countries aimed at galvanizing support for the Palestine cause on the African continent, as well as in the international arena. With regard to the recent developments at the AU, we support the suspension of Israelis' observer status at the AU. It is clear that the unjust actions committed by Israel offend the letter and spirit of the Charter of the AU. South Africa continues to believe that as long as Israel is not willing to negotiate a peace plan, Honorable Chairperson, that it cannot have the privilege to sit as an observer in the AU Assembly. As I conclude, Honorable
Deputy Minister.
Yes.
Honorable Deputy Minister, your time has expired.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable members, that concludes the debate on this topic. The next topic will start at 15:30. The debate on that topic will start at 15:30, that is 3:30 p.m. on the same platform. We just suspend the proceedings until 15:30, that is 3:30 p.m. Thank you very much.
Chair.
Can we start? It's about time.
Yes, we can start, Chair.
We shall now proceed to the last item on the order paper, which is a subject for discussion in the name of the Honorable Malatji on upgrading informal settlements to create inclusive and sustainable human settlements in cities. The Honorable Malatji, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. Because of connectivity, we all requested that we must keep our cameras off. Honorable Chairperson, the ANC government is making strides to dismantle colonial apartheid special planning by upgrading informal settlements to building inclusive and sustainable cities. The historical evolution of South African special landscapes. Honorable Chairperson, the history of Black people in the cities is a history of people without security of tenure. There is a portrayal of colonial and apartheid laws that prohibited the settlement of Black people in the cities and towns, such as the Group Areas Act and the Prevention of Illegal Squatting Act, amongst others, which were enforced with the state violence. The mushrooming of informal settlement is not a phenomenon of the new disposition, but it's a legacy of colonialism and apartheid. Our government decided early on not to follow what the apartheid government has done to remove informal settlement, but instead to upgrade the informal settlement to functioning and livable communities. Towards the realization of the 2030 National Developmental Plan vision of transformation of human settlement in the country. Honorable Chairperson, the government is upgrading the human settlement, informal settlement program response to the observation made to the National Developmental Plan, which states that the separation between social groups and long distance between jobs and houses and poor public services with poverty and inequality. The location affects the communities, local economies, labor markets, infrastructure networks. The NDP further notes the physical and the social environment in which we are born and grow up is the one of the most important determinant of every person's well-being and life chances. Honorable Chairperson, human settlement, the informal settlements, communities like Emezweni and others around the countries were as a result of needed of the communities to live closer to their places of work. You will find that the majority of residents of the community work as domestic workers and gardeners for rich families living opposite informal settlement like Hot Bay. Our government upgrading of human settlement ensures that people are not relocated from where they live, where they have built their communities, but rather improve the living conditions of those communities through the provision of basic services such as electricity, water, and sanitation, and refuse collection. In addition, the UISP ensures that other services such as educational, recreational, and economic activities are provided by the democratic state. Our people now have every right to live in such an environment nearer to the sea and access to other significant facilities. The Hot Bay area is no longer a primary preserve of white people and the wealthy. The upgrading of the informal settlements program guarantees sustainable livelihood and security for the tenure of the informal settlement communities. The impact of urban migration and lack of sufficient human settlement for the poor and the lower incoming workers. Honorable Chairperson, cities in Africa and Asia have experienced the strongest growth of rates with an average of annual growth of exceeding 6%. According to the United Nations 2008 World Cities Data booklets, the impact of the people moving from rural to urban regions in the search for better economic aspects build the sustainable strengths of government and ability to provide housing for those migrants. Communities and participation is central to the informal settlement upgrade process, affirming the injection of the Freedom Charter and the people shall govern, as it says, the people shall govern. Honorable Chairperson, the African National Congress has a long history of promoting public participation in democratic government and decision-making. The injunction of the people shall govern and finding expression in the Freedom Charter and our democratic government has put in place a legal framework promoting citizen involvement in the face of the democracy. Community involvement in the upgrading informal settlements is one of the UISP's guiding principles, and a sizable portion of funding is made available for it in the initial stage of the upgrading processes. Our community involvement focuses on a meaningful community participation in deciding the needs and the destiny of the communities. There's a symbol of participation. We create inclusive and sustainable communities by involving the community. The social challenges such as crime, improving of safety. Honorable Chairperson, sectoral issues like poverty, alcoholism, and drugs addictions are prevalent in the new informal settlements and contribute to criminality. Because they are inaccessible, the police patrol and informal settlement can't access those areas because they're designed not to be accessible. By upgrading the informal settlement after consulting the affected people, allowing government services like police patrol, ambulances to reach the affected areas. In some informal settlements like Kennedy Road, informal settlement in eThekwini Metro Municipality, the government in partnership with the community-based organizations and other stakeholders had managed through the UISP to conduct basic road access and footpaths related to stormwater control and the installation of electricity meter boxes on a prepaid basis for households in the human settlement. The UISP as an integrated and holistic approach to community development of informal settlement. Honorable Chairperson, human settlement is more than providing communities with decent housing and initial services. Our government is dedicated to giving our citizens equitable shelter by the human settlement, but most efficiently transportation system, education, recreational systems, and employment opportunities. This emphasizes that the upgrading of informal settlement has placed our government that the sector and department, the local government must work together. Our government has a chance to build inclusive, sustainable cities, but undo the special legacy of the colonization of an apartheid, and by upgrading the informal settlements, we shall act as the ANC public representative to guarantee that the ANC government implements the UISP and furthermore truly that no money is returned to the fiscals. At the same time, our people lack equitable shelter, and no one is left behind. We say that everyone has a right to shelter and everyone must be protected and a right to security. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Dr. N.V. Kumalo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Greetings to fellow members of Parliament and the citizens. In 2020, Chairperson, it was estimated that almost 67% of people in South Africa lived in urban areas and almost 5 million in informal settlements. An estimated 43% of people do not have access to clean water in our country. Yet the Q4 performance report presented in May last year revealed that the department failed to reach its target regarding the number of informal settlements upgraded to phase 3 of the UISP across the country. Business as usual for a government with very little to no tangible efforts for their many promises. Well-written policies and plans, Chairperson, mean nothing without implementation. Just a reminder, housing provision is a human right in our country. Among the biggest issues faced by people living in informal settlements are health and sanitation, education, security and insufficient access to water, never mind running water. And with the cholera rearing its ugly head in Gauteng with 6 confirmed cases, including 1 death, there's no telling the devastation it might cause in informal settlements. Seemingly, as a rule, there are usually very few, if any, resources available to residents of informal settlements in as far as sanitation and hygiene are concerned. And the upgrading of such settlements does not appear to be a priority it should be in our country. To put salt to wound, Chairperson, the minimal funds that are budgeted for upgrading informal settlements in ANC-run municipalities are not used and instead are reallocated to other provinces, often run by the Democratic Alliance, as those municipalities get things done. While the DA-run municipalities certainly make the most of the extra funding, there seems to be little accountability on other municipalities' failure to fulfill their constitutional mandate. The few water resources and government-provided facilities in existing informal settlements are often ill-maintained. The reality, Chairperson, is that those who reside in informal settlements have been left behind. All this while informal settlements continue to grow due to population growth, rural-urban migration, lack of affordable housing options and the excess thereof, and non-performing government, particularly in policy planning and urban management, economic vulnerability, continued marginalization of our people, natural disasters and climate change, as well as other things. The journey to countering the negative aspects of informal settlements will require government to acknowledge the challenges residents face, as well as actively including them in the wider city systems. It will require government to take leadership and provide enabling environments to develop and implement appropriate policies to bring about the necessary change. Government needs to connect key stakeholders, harness local knowledge, enact policies and plans, and manage incremental infrastructure development. There needs to be more competent and non-corrupt leaders in the department, leaders who are passionate about implementation, leaders who will not shift blame of non-performance to municipalities, leaders that will be on the ground where services are being offered and actively support and get involved where necessary to ensure that the vulnerable are serviced. Not the kind of leaders that will simply leave citizens to suffer non-performing spheres of government. Whose job is it to fight for those living in informal settlements, if not the National Department of Human Settlements? While one can acknowledge attempts to make some gains in granting eligible beneficiaries a variety of state-subsidized housing options, however, the gains have masked various systematic challenges that continue to compromise the enjoyment of the right of access to adequate housing. This, by the way, Chairperson, is according to a report submitted to the UN. The report further concluded that the policy responses are riddled with problems of ineffective planning and implementation, which result in informal settlements being characterized by poverty and inequality. Effective implementation of decisions made by the judiciary to protect the rights of informal settlement dwellers remains a huge challenge too. There's no doubt that South Africa cannot look to the non-performing, non-caring, and looting ANC for a better life. Citizens must not allow themselves to continue to be held hostage to inhumane conditions of living brought to them by the ANC, with one that will serve them and ensure an equal society with equal opportunities for everyone. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Your line was getting bad at the end, but thank you very much. Honorable members, let's continue. The third person on the platform is the Honorable Seki.
Greetings, Honorable Chairperson. The African National Congress government is committed to providing adequate housing to all South Africans, particularly the working class and the poor, who constitute the majority in our country. We made this commitment to the Congress of the People in 1955 in the Freedom Charter document, when we declared that there shall be houses, security, and comfort. Slums shall be demolished, and new suburbs shall be built with transportation, roads, lighting, playfields, crashes, and social centers. Thus, we define what we call human settlement. Let me switch off the camera, Chair. The lived experience of Africans before 1994 is one which they were oppressed, discriminated against, and forced removal from their homes. That's why, Chair, we call Israel an apartheid state. Because of our lived experience, our government has adopted an in-situ upgrading policy for the informal settlement where they live. The district development model is a method of crowdfunding involving various social partners and solving the budgetary constraint faced by local municipalities throughout the country. Chairperson, our government has decided to use the newest strategy the district development plan after acknowledging a lack of collaboration and coordination between government departments and the local municipality. The district development model has the potential to solve this silo mentality that has plagued our government in recent years, and the African National Congress is firmly in favor of its implementation. The DDM proposes a system that will guarantee the adoption of one budget, one plan by each district and metropolitan municipality in order to address the social challenges of inequality that leads to poverty and unemployment, as well as the development of our communities. The DDM is an opportunity or mechanism to combine all the budgets of sector departments and municipality into a single plan of action. As you would remember, Chair, that this year is a year of action by the African National Congress. Increasing effectiveness and efficiency of municipality use the municipality infrastructure grants. The Minister of Finance, Honorable Kodongwan, in his medium-term budget policy statement in October 2022, raised a chronic underspending regarding allocated infrastructure budgets by sector departments and local municipality. The average resident of our communities who are denied access to essential services like water, electricity, and sanitation services suffer the most when local government and sector departments fail to spend their allocated budgets. Also, the economy will not expand if the government does not spend the money it has been allocated. The reports indicate that part of the poor spending on allocated grants by both provincial departments and local municipalities is due to lack of financial and technical capabilities and capacity in those affected departments and municipalities. Once again, the National Treasury has reported that many of our local municipalities are in financial distress, and therefore the MTBPS, the National Treasury, has allocated additional funds to support service delivery, stabilizing municipality in distress, and developing longer run plans to improve their capabilities. Therefore, the DDM mechanism provides the opportunity for sharing financial and technical skills among three spheres of government, Chairperson: provision and availability of the fundamental service like water, electricity, refuse collection, etc., through the allocation of informal settlement upgrading partnership. Honorable Chairperson, the government of the African National Congress is dedicated to improving the lives of our people who resides in informal settlement. The Human Settlement Development Grant and the Urban Settlement Grant are two new conditional grants that the sixth administration created during the 2019-2020 financial year. Funds from both awards will be ring-fenced for the improvement of informal settlement. This reflects the level of commitment of the government by the people, showing to upgrading informal settlement around the country. We commend the National Treasury further for not reducing the allocation to the Department of Human Settlement. Instead, there was an overall increase of 6% higher than the previous financial year. The allocation to the Department of Human Settlement relate to the conditional grants that to provinces and municipalities, such as Human Settlement Development Grant, the Informal Settlement Upgrading Partnership Grant, and the Urban Settlement Development Grant. Further, we wish to acknowledge the National Treasury commitment over the 3-year medium-term expenditure between 2022 and 2025 framework. It is targeted to assist provinces and municipalities with town planning and township establishment processes in order to formalize an estimated of 900 informal settlements. That's a commitment by the ANC. And upgrading 180,000 service sites that are connected to municipality-backed infrastructure. This commitment is made through the National Upgrading Support Program. Delays in the completion of the town planning and township establishment processes have been one of the major obstacles for the underspending of conditional grants provided to provinces and municipalities. In order to address this issue, the provinces and municipalities are facing the DDM approach is in particular essential. Honorable Chairperson, the National Development Plan transformed the housing policy into human settlement policy to indicate a holistic approach taken by the government in the development of communities. The NDP 2030 states the public funding should therefore be directed towards the development of the public infrastructure and public spaces that would significantly improve the quality of life of the poor communities who cannot afford private amenities. The holistic approach by the district development model requires that all spheres of government work together to ensure that the provision of services is coordinated and integrated. When the Human Settlement Department builds houses for people, other social amenities should be provided simultaneously, such as education, health, transportation, recreational, and economic infrastructure. Thus, again, Chair, we define human settlement. The DDM complements the current intergovernmental structure. The local government had long complained that provincial and national governments undermine its power by failing to consult with it and failing to include sector departments in municipality integrated development plan. We sometimes attribute community protests to failure of local government to provide basic services to local communities. We fail to recognize that some of the responsibility in providing basic services are not the competence of local government, but for the provincial and national governments, such as school infrastructure, clinics, and safety and security, which are some of the demands of protesting communities. We believe that by adopting and implementing this district development model, the national and provincial will be brought closer to local communities for transparency and accountability, a committed government of the ANC. Lastly, Chairperson, there are three interrelated specific outcomes of upgrading informal settlement, ensuring that its spatial transformation, providing adequate housing and improved quality environment, and ensuring the security of tenure for informal settlement. Upgrading informal settlement takes an incremental approach from phase 1 to phase 3. Just to remind members that in our medium-term framework 2019-2024, our government has committed to upgrading at least 1,500 informal settlements to phase 3. Phase 3, Chairperson, means those informal settlements are livable. They are reblocked. There's services that are provided in that. The next is to build a structure, meaning that services are provided already. Regarding progress, the Department of Human Settlement and the local municipality have upgraded 610 informal settlement during 2021-2022 financial year, utilizing the informal settlement plan phases for 1 through to 3 as a performance measure, Chairperson. Chairperson, if I still have some minutes, can you give them to the next person of the African National Congress to commit for the actions that we have as a government of the people. He can still go for chairperson. Pula!
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Yes, your time was already up. May I welcome the Honorable Mandi Samakisini on her maiden speech. She's next on the platform. Honorable Member.
Ndiyabulela chairperson opportunity on Payona. I would like to take this opportunity to commend the resilience and the patience of the millions of South Africans who are homeless, who call shacks their homes because of inability of the post-1994 new apartheid regime to honor their promises. We could also like to pay tribute to the memories of hundreds of activists who have been killed by the new apartheid regime for protesting for the rights of those who live in an informal settlement. Particularly to pay tribute to the memories of the leaders of Abahlali baseMjondolo who have murdered in 2022. These are Lindokuhle Mguni, the leader was gunned down in Carton Manor in KwaZulu-Natal, in KwaZulu-Natal last year. Nokuthula Mabas, who was also shot inside her house in May 2022. And Ayada Ngila, who was assassinated at Kaneni informal settlement in March 2022. These leaders, chairperson, and many more were killed by the government of the day for daring to affirm that the people who live in informal settlement are human beings too, and they must enjoy the same rights as all South Africans. But because we live in a country where homeless, poverty,
Chairperson, point of order.
There's no point of order. It's a maiden speech, chairperson.
No.
Wait, Honorable Mkalipi, I am chairing. What is the point of order, Honorable Member?
No, thank you, Chairperson. The member on the platform is making a maiden speech, but when making a maiden speech, she cannot be offensive in her speech. Just like saying the current government has killed the people. It is not right. She cannot be offensive, otherwise it would be rough on her. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Member, I would have commented at the end of the speech about that. Can you continue, Honorable Member, with your debate?
Okay. But because we live in a country where homeless, poverty, and human living conditions have been normalized for the Black people. Chairperson, by 2022 statistics, there are over 3,200 informal settlements in this country, housing about 1.3 million households, and almost 5 million people live in informal settlement. In the country of major metropolitan cities of like Cape Town, Johannesburg, eThekwini, Buffalo City, Nelson Mandela, and Mangaung. In Cape Town and Johannesburg, in 5 people live in informal settlement. This is a problem of landless as much as it is a problem of jobless, and the framing of this debate failed to capture the essence of the problem, and we will break it down. In Duncanville village, just outside the East London, in Buffalo City Metro, about 21,000 households packed up in a piece of land that could only accommodate just 4,000 RDP houses. In Kenneth Road in eThekwini, KwaZulu-Natal, has over 6,000 households just in 10 hectares of piece of land. The same pattern applies in many other places in the country. Millions of Black people are stuck like sardines in a rat-infested, in a fleet-ridden shacks. That the living conditions, they are not acceptable. They live like this because there is no land in which they can have respectable homes. This informal settlement can never be upgraded. They are inhabitable, and mere because of the land is not enough. What needs to be done by all spheres of government is to make land available for human settlement across the country so that the government can build homes where the people themselves are able to build their own houses. This can only be done through the progressive and targeted program of taking land from the minority that are now owned by them to make it available for human settlement. It can be done through building internal capacity in municipality themselves by having state-owned construction companies to build housing and reduce cost of instead of putting constructive project on tender. We need to abolish these tenders, Rechiloka 2013. In immediate, we must rezone the residential areas to have minimum standard for human settlement, whose ultimate aim is to eradicate the shacks, to ensure that these have basic provision such as roads, water, electricity, and sanitation, sport and recreational facilities. This means that we must deliberately attempt to decluster these areas to make way for human living conditions. Lastly, Chairperson, this is not possible under the government of Ndate Ramaphosa, that is so scared to take the land from the white to build for the Black people. That is why we call all people of South Africa, 20 March, come and join us, especially those who stayed in the informal settlement who need land. They must join us, otherwise that day will be the day of the solution for all the South African. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable members, it's always not easy to dictate how a person is going to come up with a debate or how the person is going to debate. But we always encourage members not to go on an offensive, especially on a maiden speech. I'm sure that will be taken into consideration by parties as they welcome members into our new fold, on the new fold. Thank you very much, Honorable Kosi Buthelezi. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chairperson. Informal settlements have not historically been addressed in South Africa's housing policy, with the focus previously centering on moving people to large-scale RDP housing projects. These projects are generally developed in remote locations, which do very little to speak to the historic spatial divide which we face in South Africa. For a long time, informal settlements have been considered to be temporary. However, we are seeing an important shift towards improving and not removing. It is clear that these settlements are not going to just disappear. The important task of channeling funds in the right ways in order to upgrade these vast informal settlements is one the government must take on with commitment and pragmatism. Presently, residents in informal settlements face a myriad of social, economic, and political factors that shape their built environment and have negative impacts on their health and well-being. To bring about real change, it is imperative to move beyond research and ideas and take tangible actions. This should be done through the upgrading of service management. A lack of basic services has resulted in inhumane living conditions. Garbage removal should be prioritized, and informal settlements should be the last place in which it gets neglected. Adequate sewage removal infrastructure is essential and should be improved. Basic infrastructure such as a paved road goes a long way in upgrading the urban fabric of informal settlements. This has a great sociological effect on the very people, on the way people perceive their community and their safety in public spaces. A basic infrastructure item such as a tree and a water tap becomes a gathering place for people and a space where children play. The informal settlements are here to stay. Pushing structures which are built due to a lack of understanding or absent zoning must give way to collaboration between officials, town planners, and community members to work with what is already built. With the help of qualified professionals, we must begin to reimagine streetscapes in informal settlements with fewer boundary lines and a move towards a townhouse typology. which is more appropriate for high-density areas. Accessibility and function in these spaces can be greatly improved. Research found that 60% of township micro-enterprises operate from residential properties. Land constraints and zoning continue to choke the microeconomics and livelihoods within these communities. Historically, residents of these areas were not allowed to run businesses. This has choked the skill of entrepreneurship. This should not only be stopped, but reversed by creating an enabling environment for regulated trade to make these settlements more sustainable. One must consider where money circulates within them. Currently, the most common scenario is that people leave their settlements to go to work. They return with income, but that income quickly leaves again with purchases that are made at large retail stores. The money thus enters and exits the settlement without ever circulating within it. Circulation within it is what would grow a microeconomy. Land use opportunities that encourage money to flow within the community before it exits the community. Finally, the private sector must be encouraged to participate in the housing crisis, and channels for this to happen must be made easier. Housing fabricated off-site can radically reduce the rate and cost at which housing can be provided. The need to upgrade informal settlements brings with it the potential of real innovation for people to come up with new building methods that challenge the status quo and that can provide solid, dignified housing at an affordable rate. Once living environment has...
Honorable President.
Thank you, Chairperson.
The time is
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Honorable P. May. Honorable May. FF plus.
Dankie voorsitter. Op die oomblik is daar ongeveer 5 miljoen SHAIK bewoners in Suid-Afrika. Die omstandighede is haglik, maar dit groei steeds. Die opgradering van bestaande informele nedersettings in Suid-Afrika is byna 'n onmoontlike taak, maar dit kan wel in die toekoms gebeur as die regte prosedure gevolg word. Baie van die besette gebiede is nog nie eers as residensiële gebiede geoormerk nie, en dan is die klaar vol plakkers. Voorsitter, die staat en munisipaliteite is nie daartoe in staat om onwettige informele nedersettings te verhoed of te beheer nie. In 2019 het ek vir die minister van menslike nedersettings gesê dat daar moenie gesê word daar is nie grond beskikbaar nie. Daar is baie grond. Die vorige spreker is verkeerd om te sê daar is nie genoeg grond nie. En ek het daarop gewys dat om die metros in Suid-Afrika lê daar duisende hektaar grond. Maar hierdie grond is landbougrond en dit moet ontkoppel word tot residensiële eiendom. Ek het by regsgeleerdes uitgevind, hulle het my gesê dit kan tot 6 jaar neem, maar met wetgewing kan ons dit wel verhaas. 2 maande later toe kondig die minister aan dat daar 14.000 hektaar grond beskikbaar is om die metros, maar niks het gebeur nie en dien wel teen 'n slakkepas. Wat is die grootste rede vir die groeiende informele nedersettings? Ons verwys altyd daarna as bevolkingsaanwas, maar dit is verblywend om te sê dat die bevolkingsaanwas die afgelope paar jaar afgeneem het. Tweedens is dit die instroom van onwettige persone uit Afrika. Die onwettige burgers is ook een van die oorsake van hoë misdaad in Suid-Afrika. Die grootste probleem in Suid-Afrika is dat hierdie informele gebiede onwettig beset word en die munisipaliteite dit eenvoudig net toelaat. In die meeste gevalle beset hulle gebiede waar dit moeilik is om dienste te verskaf, soos water, elektrisiteit en die kostes is dan ook baie hoog. Ons het 'n geval daarso nou ook tussen Dispatch en Port Elizabeth waar teen hulle 'n rand byvoorbeeld gaan plak het. Die kostes is geweldig hoog. Hulle dreig dan die munisipaliteite, paaie word gebrand, mense word weggehou van die werk en dit lei tot groot ekonomiese agteruitgang. Baie kan nie eers by hulle werk kom baie daar nie. Die polisie is magteloos, want hulle kan niks doen nie. Kyk jy na gebiede soos die Wes-Kaap, is dit onmoontlik om vir al daardie plakkers op die N2 van hophuise te voorsien, omrede dit by die dag groei. Wat is die oplossing? Eerstens moet stadsbeplanners weet waar grond beskikbaar is om die informele nedersettings te vestig, dan moet erwe uitgesit word en die basiese dienste aangelewer word. En moet daar baie streng teen die informele nedersetters opgetree word indien hulle ander grond onwettig beset. Ons moet streng reëls toepas. Indien daar vroegtydig grond geëien en ontwikkel word, kan die munisipaliteite toesien dat slegs 1 shack op 'n erf geplaas word en die gebied waar die hophuis gebou moet word, moet oopgelaat word sodat bouwerk kan voortgaan sonder om die shackbewoner te steur. Die proses is suksesvol in KwaZulu-Natal op Naag toegepas in die 80er jare en dit is as uiters suksesvol beskou. Voorsitter, ons sit in Suid-Afrika met groot probleme. As jy dink aan die arme mense in hierdie land, is een van die grootste probleme die afstand van hulle werke af. Ons het die afgelope jaar in 3 maande probleem. Prasa, wat tussen Uitenaag, Dispatch en Port Elizabeth moet ry, se kaartjies is enkel R9, dubbel R18. Die trein is nie meer beskikbaar nie. Hulle sê daar is nie lokomotiewe nie. Wat is die gevolg? Die arme mense moet met taksies ry wat R60 'n dag is. En dit is onmoontlik as jy kyk byvoorbeeld mieliemeel wat 33% op is die afgelope tyd. Ek wil afsluit. Ek wil net vir u sê, ons kan hierdie probleme oplos, maar dan sal ons harder moet werk aan werkloosheid. En 'n ander ding is, industriële gebiede moet nader geskei word aan die informele nedersettings. Baie dankie, voorsitter.
Thank you very much, Honorable May. Good. There's no one. Is there a person from Good? AIC, Honorable Shafter. Honorable Shafter, it's your turn. Seems Honorable Shafter is not there. I will pass. The Honorable Semenya from the ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon to honorable members. Honorable Chairperson, the disastrous effects that Cyclone Freddy, which is rapidly approaching, will have on our nation is something that we anticipate as the nation. As we debate in this August House, we witness the detrimental effects of the recent floods of Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal residents, community residing in these formal settlements with well-built homes, and those living in informal settlement were also severely impacted by the recent floods. To develop an inclusive and sustainable human settlement, not just to upgrade the informal settlement, but also to ensure that all human settlement addresses apartheid special planning and are climate change resilient. Our caring government, the African National Congress, must move quickly on these plans and strategies to ensure that no one is left behind. The government's plan should also consider the settlements that are currently in place. Honorable Chair and members, South Africa is the signatory to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The 11th SDG focuses on making cities and human settlement more inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Climate change-related factors such as rising sea levels, droughts, floods, vector-borne diseases, and temperature-related morbidity in urban setting have a huge negative impact on African continent and our country. Similarly, water supply and irrigation reservoir failures in seasonal river catchments could lead to unhealthy urban conditions and a lack of food. Honorable Chair and members, individuals residing in our nation's informal settlement would be the most affected by climate change. Although there are currently not minimum health hazard in this informal settlement, temperature fluctuation that affects the dispersal of diseases vector like mosquitoes make this population more exposed to vector-borne illnesses. The threat posed by the housefly rapid reproduction, particularly in unhygienic conditions, could include human disease. The government must accelerate the upgrading processes to ensure that the environment in informal settlement is suitable for habitation. Honorable Chair and members, during the execution of the second edition of the Environmental Implementation Plan, the Department of Human Settlement commissioned an evaluation study on the environmental impact of human settlement development initiatives, impacts on human settlement development project on the environmental occur across all environmental component of air, water, land, and biodiversity. The report concludes reads, 3 crucial recommendations were given in the study for the department to take into account. 1, the department should integrate information about sustainable human settlement development in the policies, plans, and program it is still developing. This information should consider both beneficiaries, occupancy phases, and the effects that different stages of development have on environment. Number 2, policies, plans, and program should not repeat or include extracts from reference documents that contain requirements or specification for sustainable development and environmental compliance, because doing so could create confusion about which impact or development standard or specification are required and which are not. Regarding the effects of human settlement development, which is number 3, on the environmental policies and programs should refer to the Environmental Implementation Plan. Honorable Chair and members, our duty as members of the Human Settlement Portfolio Committee is to see that the National Department of Human Settlement implements the recommendation I just mentioned for upcoming housing projects, including upgrading informal settlements, to comply with this recommendation. Honorable Chair and members, by their virtue and nature, informal settlement utilize coal and wood to make fire for cooking and lighting. This is true not just of South Africa, but of other countries as well. Insufficient sanitization system contaminates the air we breathe in addition to the water we drink. One of the problems facing the informal settlement is waste management. If this problem is not addressed, the land contamination and the possibility of new emerging and the re-emerging infectious illnesses would result. All of these actions help the increased greenhouse gas emission, which in turn causes climate change. Honorable members, we have all seen firsthand the devastation caused by the climate change in our country, by the floods in the province of KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape, particularly the KwaZulu-Natal province. Many informal settlements are constructed on a floodplain. Extreme weather events could not be endured by the building material used to build the homes. The vulnerability of informal settlements to climate-related incidents has increased due to poor spatial planning, and a disproportionate amount of that population has experienced displacement. Honorable Chair and members, ours is to ensure that government, in the upgrading of informal settlement, prioritize the use of low carbon and environmental friendly technology to ensure that the impact of the building processes doesn't further increase the amount of carbon emanations that will be emitted as the result of developing the infrastructure. Radical public awareness on the effects of the climate change need to be taken in the country, and it most likely will not be solely focused on informal settlement, but rather throughout the general population. Further, our democratic government must act swiftly to alleviate the land shortage for the human settlement, to stop the growth of squatter communities in places like floodplains and inhabitant settings. The democratic government can expropriate land of human settlement under Section 9(3) of the Housing Act. It is about time that government exercise the provision of the Housing Act to cap land invasion by communities through the provision of service sites for housing. honorable members and chair, when President Ramaphosa declared government's vision of building 3 smart cities in his State of the Nation address in 2019, some of you ridiculed the idea, while others mocked it. However, the devastating impact of the climate change has recently forced of you to consider the idea of smart cities. For those who do not understand the concept of smart cities, it is used to describe the technologically enhanced metropolitan environment that uses variety of electrical devices and sensors to collect specific data. In turn, data from inhabitants, devices, building assets are used to monitor and manage various activities such as the traffic and transportation system, power plant utilities, water supplies, networks, waste, and other community services. We applaud our government for creating and implementing the framework for South African cities, led by the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. We urge all the sector departments, including those in charge of human settlement, public works and infrastructure, water and sanitation, to apply the framework as a framework's guiding principle when carrying out their own internal plans. Honorable Chair and members, the Department of Science and Technology and Innovation has been hard at work developing new technology that would contribute to mitigation against the effects of climate change. This is done in collaboration with the Department of Human Settlement. The Department of Science and Innovation has significantly contributed to how green technologies can be used within the human settlement sector. The Green Village concept, where the new human settlement would be built based on the off-grid green village model. The off-grid green village model ensures that all materials and technology used in constructing new human settlement or upgrading existing informal settlement are environmental friendly and recyclable. Using the recyclable material and technology has the potential to boost local population, employment prospects, improving the living condition in informal settlement. To make sure that this new technology are long-term sustainable and the project have community ownership, the community need to be involved, Honorable Chairperson. Let's make the public participation a reality in South Africa. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Smenya. The Honorable Powell.
Thanks, Chairperson. Honourable members, we cannot come before this House and honestly debate the creation of sustainable human settlements without addressing the issue of illegal land grabs, which have now become a crisis. Chairperson, the absence of brave leadership is the avoidance of tough conversations. It's easier to look the other way rather than deal with a challenge that has now become an emergency, crippling towns and cities the length and breadth of our nation. And as with all of our country's most pressing issues, the ANC have yet again buried their heads in the sand, shifting blame for what is essentially their failure to act, their failure to remedy outdated laws and to provide adequate resources to municipalities. And once again, it's the men and women who rely most heavily on government services that feel the greatest impact of the ANC's inaction. Chairperson, the ANC wants to come to this House and talk about dignity. But in provinces where they govern, like the Free State, service stands are handed out to beneficiaries without basic infrastructure connections like water pipes and electricity networks. In Yachtkral de la Reyesville in the northwest, more than 1,000 illegal occupants live on agricultural land with no electricity, water, sanitation, or nearby schools. No development can take place until the outstanding land restitution case is resolved, which the ANC is simply ignoring. This situation has abounded for 20 years, while our ministers are asleep on the job. In eThekwini, one of the main reasons the city had no suitable land on which to construct TRUs for flood victims is because Cabinet has been sitting on more than 14,000 hectares of available land for close to a decade that they have still not fully released for housing development. In the Western Cape, 355 million rand had to be spent last year to prevent illegal land invasions. This year, 136 million rand has so far been spent on security at development sites in the province. But this is still not enough. In Siyahlala in Dunoon, railway tracks have been removed to make way for land invaders, and each time the local authorities have identified suitable land to relocate the occupiers, this land has been invaded too. Both Metrorail and PRASA are unable to operate trains, the cheapest form of transport available in South Africa, because illegal land invasions make it impossible. And what was the ANC-run PRASA's solution to this? Well, it was to employ ex-Umkhonto we Sizwe military veterans, in other words, cadres, in an attempt to protect the rail service. And despite PRASA's so-called solution, damage done to rail infrastructure in Cape Town is now reported to amount to more than 4 billion rand. Chairperson, despite being well aware of the realities, representatives of small parties also like to come before this House and dog whistle. But it's these small parties who act behind the scenes to destabilize this country at every possible turn for their own selfish objectives. Let's take Good as an example. In Grabo in the Western Cape, the Minister for Public Works, Minister Patricia de Lille, who is the leader of the Good Party, allowed for a coordinated land invasion to take place on prime forestry plantation. This coordinated invasion destroyed the potential for thousands of jobs in the forestry sector and forced Minister Barbara Creasy to render the land unusable. Local leaders from de Lille's own Good Party have admitted in media reports that they actively encouraged and helped people to invade the land, which later led to Good winning just enough votes to form a coalition of corruption with the Patriotic Alliance in that municipality. Honourable members, just imagine how many land invasions could have been avoided during the state of disaster if the National Department of Human Settlements had actually spent money that was available to help evictees. Despite 377 million rand having been allocated—
Point of order, Chairperson.
It took the department—
Honourable Powell, will you hold? What is
Sure.
the point of order, Honourable Member?
No, Chairperson, I've raised my hand long time ago through the gadget. I see you couldn't see that.
I couldn't see it, Honourable
Yeah.
Member.
So the member cast aspersions on the character of the Minister of Public Works by saying that she coordinated the land invasion. She knows very well that if she's about to make such an allegation, she must bring it through a substantive motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Rule
Honourable.
86.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'm sure the member has been made aware of that. That is not allowed. That's unparliamentary, Honourable Member. Could you please withdraw that?
Chairperson, it's interesting to see the ANC defending Good. I think that tells the people of this country everything we need to know about the minister. I withdraw. May I continue?
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Powell.
Thank you, Chairperson. Despite 377 million rand having been allocated to rental relief, it took the department more than a year to finalize the policy, and 2 years later, only 2 million rand of this had been spent. During this same time, land invasions spiraled out of control, with 69,000 new informal structures put up in Cape Town alone. These numbers are because South Africans are now voting with their feet and heading to the Western Cape in higher numbers than ever before as the rest of South Africa collapses. They're coming to this province because they know this is where the jobs are. 167,000 of the 169,000 jobs created in South Africa in the last quarter came from the DA-run Western Cape. Chairperson, We as leaders have a legal duty to find solutions to the crisis of land invasions so that law-abiding South Africans patiently waiting on the housing list are finally able to access their opportunities. We need economic development, rapid state land release, and sensible legislation to finally end illegal land invasions and create dignified human settlements. These are just some of the reasons why the DA has now gazetted a private member's amendment bill that will see Parliament finally being compelled to find a solution to this crisis for the benefit of our poorest citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Powell. The Honorable Malatji, please close the debate.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll start by forgiving the honorable newcomer from the EFF because she was not here when a political party voted against the land to go to the hands of our people. His political party, the EFF, voted with the DA so that the land must remain in the hands of the few. And also I'll forgive her because she might not be aware that a lot of illegal invasion in this country, which mainly the land is mainly invaded and occupied by illegal foreigners mobilized by the EFF, who ultimately at the end, they end up being affected by disasters because most of them have built in areas where they're not supposed to build, and they become victims to serious disasters that are faced with. Now, I'll forgive on those bases, but also just to remind Honorable Powell that the reason we have crisis is like our people occupying areas where not supposed to occupy, like railways and other areas that she's mentioning. Because mainly what I heard from her speech, she was mainly protecting white privilege. She only speaks about farms that benefit the minorities and areas that don't benefit majorities. They occupy that land because they have nowhere to stay, because majority of that land was stolen by those that she's protecting, and they have nowhere to go. They're stripped of their dignity on those bases. Now, to restore their dignity, she must come back again and vote with the African National Congress so that we take back the land and be able to give our people proper settlements so that dignity is restored. And I want to agree with the Freedom Front Plus and mobilize them that it's very important that they mobilize their voters who owns the land around the metros to release the land for human settlement use. They must not keep the land for themselves and their friends because they know that they stole that land. It is not supposed to have that land. That land is supposed to be in the hands of the majority, who are the ones who are suffering and lost their dignity on those bases. Now, all of these opposition parties who come here and make noise, it's very important that we expose them that they're fully participating in the process of removing the dignity of our people. Now, you go to areas like Khayelitsha, the living conditions in Khayelitsha, Langa, and many other human settlements across the country are a reality that requires us to be innovative and a solution to improve the lives of our people. The government has indeed developed a program which responds to the varying condition of informal settlement. The consensual development for Department of Human Settlement, then Housing Department, precisely to ensure that the government provide various basic services and land tenure rights which are critical for security and comfort for our citizens. Various countries such as Rwanda focuses on land tenure as the key aspects of ensuring that citizens develop their own houses, as this has been identified as a key implementing for the people to build their own homes. In Brazil, favela upgrading does not involve the construction of top housing structures because the government expects residents to build their own houses. And an underlying government assumption is that once the households have some degree of security of stature, they are more likely to invest in their own money, however, in the small construction. Even through the search and obstacles, but the program has reached approximately 2.5 billion families with an investment of a total population of $2 billion USD, making it one of the largest international informal upgrading programs. Now, it is very important that we also remind that as much as the leader of the EFF goes around naming informal settlement under his name, he does not even stay in those informal settlements when there's disasters. He's there in Sandton eating sushis and running around with cigarette smugglers. The land distribution program is a critical pillar in addressing the spiral informal settlement, and the department will appropriate the land for human settlement purposes, and the public works will continue to release the land for decent human settlement. Government should accelerate the distribution of services and sites for urban areas. We are opposed to the anarchy of land grabs, which neglects due process putting citizens under undeveloped areas. The ANC government developed a program to ensure that we improve the living condition of those informal settlements. It is a fact that many informal settlements across the country have been upgraded with the provision of electricity, as an example, and water, and the development of roads and sanitation facilities. The way some insufficient to those with access to services for migrant workers from rural areas who stay in the informal settlement in search of better life in the cities. The intervention by the department improves the lives of the poor, unemployed, and low-income earners in South Africa who cannot afford decent houses. Our government also provides social housing projects for the poor, and we should not take it for granted. By the way, the Freedom Charter proclaimed that in the future, that the democratic state will ensure that there are houses, comfort, and security. The upgrading of informal settlement through the UISP is to implement the existing housing delivery program, such as the Breaking New Ground mass housing program and the rental and the housing program. The upgrading of human settlement or informal settlement program is a very progressive government policy that needs to be strengthened to continue to improve the life conditions of informal settlements. Now, the ANC does not speak, the ANC implements. It is the African National Congress that has developed more townships than any other. It's the African National Congress that has placed our people next to economic activities, while the past apartheid government has moved them far away from activities so that they continue to exploit them. They come back the second day for labor. The African National Congress brings them closer to cities, bring them closer to beaches, bring them closer to all of these areas. It is African National Congress that does not place illegal migrants into houses. It's the African National Congress that says everyone must come to this country, who must apply in this country for housing, must prove that they're citizens of this country, against other small parties called the EFF, who have continuously made sure that they collapse the infrastructure of our country. The same political party that's mobilizing a shutdown of a country that is trying to protect, to create jobs and reserve its private sector and the economy. Now, it is the ANC, African National Congress, that will protect those jobs against an organization of anarchy called the EFF, who wants to make sure that places our people to remain unplaced so that anarchy prevailed. Illegal migrants come into the country, they continue to do crimes, they continue to invade land, they continue to be a problem for our education, our health system. But the ANC comes with solutions, and the solution is to implement. While we're still waiting, we implement. While we're still waiting, we implement upgrading of informal settlement as a temporary relief for people to be liberated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Malatji. Honorable members, that concludes the debate and the business of this virtual mini-plenary session. And the mini-plenary will now rise.
Pata Malatji, Pata!